LaunchCode students. If you are watching this, you are likely part of a web development course with LaunchCode. And in the first unit for JavaScript, you will have 6 graded assignments. I'm going to do a series of videos to introduce them one by one, give you an overview of everything, and hopefully help you get a strong start here. This one is called candidate testing. So let me tell you what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go over some of the core concepts that are covered by this, which chapters and concepts in the book are included in this. So you're clear on what you need to know and what you don't need to worry about yet as you continue to progress in your lectures. And I'm going to give you an overview of the instructions and do a couple demos for you so you can see what it's supposed to look like, the program as it runs. We'll take a look at the starter code so you can get oriented to that a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about some of the most common issues that students run into and how you can avoid those. And then some reminders, just general reminders. And I will also want to share some extra prep resources that I have on my website at codewithcarrie.com that will help you prepare even more for this if you have a little extra time to put into it. All right, let's start at the beginning and look at the core concepts. So there are 3 parts to this assignment. Because this is the very first one, they break it down for you and let you work on it a little bit at a time. Part 1 focuses on the things that you learn in graded assignment 0 and in chapters 1 through 6. So things like declaring and initializing variables, printing to the console, interacting with the user, using logic with conditionals, debugging on your own, running the auto grader tests. And that's something that is specifically covered in that graded assignment number 0. So make sure you're clear on all of those before you dive into part 1. And then parts 2 and 3 are where you're going to focus more on things that are taught in chapters 7 through 9. So things like string methods, arrays and array methods, iterating with loops, formatting output with template literals, and things like that, where you're going to be working a little bit more in depth with data and how to process it and how to run a full program that a user can interact with in the console. So let's look a little bit at what this is going to be about. If we go over to the instructions in the book, click right over into here, you can see that this is below all of the chapters in the book. So if you come down to the bottom, you'll see a section called graded assignments. And this is graded assignment number 1. There are 4 main sections here. And the first one is the project introduction. So they'll give you a link to the starter code repo where you can, fork it and make sure you enable GitHub Actions. That's not specifically mentioned in the directions at this point, but that's very important for it to be able to grade it on GitHub for your TAs to reference. You want to clone this down to your local machine, and then they give you a reminder to use npm install to make sure your dependencies are installed, which is a combination of the readline sync library that you need to get user input, and also Jest, which runs the auto grader tests. Then there's just a general overview of the requirements for all 3 parts that, I'm going to kind of help you go through. And then a screenshot of the example output in the console. Let's look at this. So here's the link to the repo. And if you click on this, it'll take you over to LaunchCode Education's candidate testing auto graded repository. You do not want to use this green button here. You want to make sure that you go here and fork it first. And then you'll have your very own copy of this. And that's when you'll then come down here and click on this and get that link. But you just want to make sure that you're cloning from your copy, your forked copy, and not from theirs. When you do get to your own copy, that you'll also want to go to this Actions tab and make sure that you have this enabled. This has already been enabled, but you're going to see something that will allow you to enable it when you get there. Okay. Yeah, and then they remind you here about using npm install. Once you have created the clone on your local machine and have navigated into that project file. Okay, so they give you a rundown here of the requirements for the end assignment. In short, you're going to ask a candidate to enter their name. You will use a loop to ask 5 questions, one at a time, to the candidate. You'll collect their answers, check the answers for accuracy, and make sure that's a case-insensitive equality check. And keep track of how many they get right, how many they get wrong, calculate their overall percentage, and then you'll have a way to tell, like, if they got 80% or better, then they are passing. If they don't get 80% or higher, then they fail. And then you'll have a way to display those results in kind of a little report at the end. But this is the end result. You are going to do this a little bit at a time. And so you're just going to start with part 1, but you want to read everything before you start, okay? And they're going to kind of go over this and break this down into the 3 parts. I'm going to cover this in just a second, but I wanted to show you this screenshot here that gives you a look at what it's supposed to look like to print this final part after you've conducted the quiz, so that they see the entire, their answers, the correct answers, and then they see their final percentage and, whether they passed or failed. This is, where you're headed ultimately. So let's take a look at part 1 and just talk about exactly what it is that you're supposed to focus on just for this part. So you just want to ask the user for their name and greet them. That means you're going to need to know how to use user input. You're going to ask a single question. They're going to tell you which one to use, receive the response from the user, and then let them know if it was correct or not. So just a little bit of logic, was it correct? Was it not correct? And then you'll just tell them something different depending on how they answer. And you want to make sure to run the program with node index to make sure it works, because you're playing the role of the user as you test your own code. And then also run the auto grading tests with npm test, and you want to make sure you pass tests 1 through 6 for this. The rest of them can fail, and that's totally cool. But just to get through part 1, you want 1 through 6 passing. So this is what it looks like. I have a little demo here for part 1. If I do, notice I'm in the main directory, candidate testing auto graded, and the index file is here. So I'm just going to say node index, and I have created a little greeting. It says, "Greetings, candidate. What is your name?" And so I'll say Carrie, and they'll say, "Welcome, Carrie. We have a short quiz for you. Who was the first American woman in space?" Well, I'm going to answer. Let's test it wrong first. I'll say Mae Jemison. Sorry, that is incorrect. Okay. And then I say, okay, but I need to test my logic the other way. So I'm going to run it the other way, and I'll put my name in, and then I'll answer it correctly, Sally Ride. And it says correct. Okay, so you've just seen a demonstration of the entire thing that you have to do just for part 1. That's it. You don't have to worry about asking 5 questions. You don't have to worry about knowing how to use arrays or loops or anything like that yet. You're just doing basic user interaction with variables and logic, conditionals. That's it. Okay. Part 2. This is where you are going to get more into the stuff in chapters 7, 8, 9. So you want to replace most of the code that you wrote in part 1 at this point, so that you can just ask 5 questions and you're not asking just 1 question anymore. And you're going to use arrays to store the questions, store the correct answers, and store the user's responses. You want to have a loop that will ask the questions and gather those answers from the user. And that's kind of, this section up here that you see. And then you'll use a loop to print the question, their response, and the correct answer. And that's the section you see down here. Again, run the program with node index while you're testing it and playing the part of the user to make sure it's running properly. And then you can run those auto grading tests with npm test. And at this point, you want to make sure you pass tests 1 through 10. I just realized I forgot to show you the tests for the first part. So let me do the test for part 1 before I switch over to the demo for part 2. Yeah. Okay. So you're going to see a whole bunch of failures, right? 11 failed, but you see that 6 passed out of the 17. And that's what you want. If you scroll up here to where they list them all, you can see that the first 6 pass, and that's all you need for part 1. And then if I switch over to part 2, so I will check out part 2 demo. Let's go ahead and run the program, and then I'll run the tests. All right, so I'm going to node index, and it says, "What is your name, candidate?" And I'll say Carrie, and I'm going to go through the quiz. So Sally Ride, that's true, and 40. You're going to get to know these answers really well, guys. And the minimum size for the crew is 3. Okay. So it goes through and it says, candidate name is Carrie. It lists each question, and with each question lists the answer and the correct answer. And all of this is done using arrays and loops. So you're going to, need to work out how to make that happen. We're going to look at the starter code in a minute. For now, I just kind of want to show you what the results are supposed to be. And that's it. You don't have to worry about that very last part of grading the quiz. That is for part 3. So let's just run the tests here. I'm going to say npm test. And we see that we have 10 passed and only 7 failed. And that's exactly where you want to be at the end of part 2. We'll have these first 10 where it's just looking at the arrays and all of that, but it's not looking at the grading yet. All of that is for part 3. Okay, so let's come over here and talk about part 3. Your focus for this is just to compare the candidates' answers to the correct answers and make sure that comparison is case insensitive so that you're still giving them credit for getting it right, even if they use uppercase or lowercase. Track how many of them are correct as you do that, and then print a final report that has the grade as a % and tells them whether they passed or they failed. And you can pay attention to that formatting that's in that screenshot I showed you right here. You want to make it look just like this. So you need to make sure you have whatever screen, like line breaks at different points, your spacing of everything, where they use parentheses and all of these things. Just pay attention to that. You want it to look like this. Wrong way. Here we go. And let's see. Yes, again, run the program multiple times. You want to test it for different grade levels because you want to make sure that, they fail if they get less than 80%, they pass if they get 80% or if they get 100%. And, just keep testing that out to make sure it's working no matter what. Test it to make sure it works for case insensitivity. And make sure all of those things are working, and then run the auto grading test, which will also be checking for some of those things, and that'll help you, be sure to. So you should be able to pass all 17 tests at this point. Let's go over and I will check out my branch for part 3 and show you how it works. So let's do node index to run it. Okay, what is your name, candidate? Carrie. I'll go through and give answers. I'm going to intentionally do some lowercase here. I'll put ride in lowercase r. I'll say false on this one and 30, or 20 on that one. Trajectory. And then let's say I get this one right. So this would be a 3. Okay. So I only got 3 out of the 5 correct. So I fail. You can see down here at the bottom, it printed everything out for me, showed me, my answers, the right answers, and then 60%, 3 of 5 correct. So I failed. So let's do it again. This time I will, get all of them right. How's that? Sally ride, true, 40, trajectory. I can put that in lowercase and it should still work. And there we go, 100%, 5 of 5 correct, and we passed. And you can see that this looks just like it does in that screenshot, this whole section with all the spacing and everything. Now we need to take a look at the actual code so that you can understand, where are you going to go to create the code that's going to make all of this happen, right? So let's come over and look at that. The file structure is kind of the first thing to get oriented to. And that's going to be, you want to look at that package.json file because that has those dependencies. And just, if you see that and you don't have the package lock.json or the node modules, you need to run npm install and make sure those appear, and then you'll be good to go. Don't modify anything except for candidate testing.js. Let me go ahead and switch back to main here. And then let's take a look at the files. Okay. So here's that tree. You can see that I already, I did, run an npm install. So I have the package.json, I have the node modules. That's what makes the just test work. It's what makes the readline sync library available. But the only file that you want to edit is this one, candidate testing. And they've got a bunch of to-dos for you here. This index file is the one that gets run because it actually runs your program from the candidate testing file. You don't need to worry about all of this. Just leave that alone. And make sure you leave everything alone here at the bottom. But you're going to put your code in all the sections in the middle. We'll talk about it in detail in just a minute. So again, that index.js file is the one you run in, with the command node index. The test directory has that autograder file. That's right here. And you will learn in chapter 14 how to write these tests. But for now, all you need to know is they are there to help you understand what you still need to fix if there's something that needs to be fixed. And it's also going to help your TAs, with grading. So where would you actually add your code, right? Inside this file, candidate testing.js, you may notice at the very top that the import for readline sync has already been provided. Let me get back to that file. Here we go. So yeah, line 1, they've already got it for you. So you're halfway there. The variables that you need for both part 1 and part 2 have been declared, but they have not been initialized. So you can see here, they've got, let candidate name, let question, let correct answer, let candidate answer. These 4 are the ones you need for part 1. You can leave these alone for part 1 because you don't need these until part 2. So just let them sit there just like that. But these, they've been declared, but you'll notice they don't have any initialization. They don't have any values assigned to them. So follow the instructions really carefully to know how you should initialize these. And then you're going to see there's 4 functions that you should put your code inside, and they have to-dos in different places, but you really want to read the instructions in the course book carefully for this because most of what you need to understand is in the book. But I'll show them to you. Ask for name, ask question, and grade quiz is where you're going to put most of your code. And what happens, you may not have learned functions yet, and that's okay. You don't need to know how to write functions, but I will at least explain to you how this works. Essentially, what a function does is it allows you to encapsulate some code, several lines of code inside this body that these curly braces enclose. Anything that's defined inside here is the code that will only execute when this function is actually called. And so the 4th function, run program, is where you see these being called. It calls ask for name, it calls ask question. So basically you can code all of this stuff here, but it does not get run. Those lines don't get executed until it's called down here. And they've already done that part for you because they know that you don't, they're not expecting you to know how to write functions yet. But you do need to make sure you put the right code in the right place. So they've marked this for you that ask for name, it has 1 job, and that's for you to ask for the candidate's name. And then you'll be storing it in the variable for that. And then this one has 1 job, which is to ask the question. And in part 1, you only ask a single question, right? But later in part 2, you'll modify this to ask all 5 questions. And then also, collect their answers. But this is where you want to do that. And that's the only thing you're really supposed to do here. And then this one, grade quiz, is where you are going to focus on actually evaluating the answers to see if they were correct or incorrect, calculating the grade, which you won't do until part 3. So you don't need to worry about that in part 2. But you will, be doing some, different things in each one of these. And then this run program will do everything in the right sequence. For part 1, you do want to make sure you add in the greeting to the candidate so that after you've asked for their name, you use their name here in a little statement just to greet them. And they've even give you the console log here to put it in, so you know exactly where to put it. So they've done a pretty good job of structuring this for you, which is really, really a good thing. Make sure you don't modify the exports object at the bottom. I mentioned that already. This is important for the program to be able to run from index and also for the autograder test to be able to do its job. So you can leave that alone and pretty much leave this alone except for where you put in this greeting. Just focus on what you need to do with these variables and the code that you add to each of these functions between these curly braces where you see the to-dos, okay? And Past that, I would say just follow, the instructions, because they do break it down for you. If you come in here to the part 1 section, they kind of reiterate what it is that you're focusing on, and how there's to-dos. And then they go over them 1.1 and 1.2. This is where they tell you how to ask for the candidate's name and store it in this variable, and then greet them, in the run program function. And then here they, kind of outline for you how to go about asking a question, what that question should be, what the correct answer is. And then they remind you how to test everything. So you want to make sure that you are following this in sequence, because doing all of the stuff in the right order is important. And then when you have this done and your TA has checked it out and they tell you you're good to go, then you move on to part 2. So this is the part where you're going to be, asking multiple questions. They give you a table here that actually tells you what those questions are, what the answers are that corresponding to them. And they warn you here to make sure that when you place all of this data in the arrays, that you keep them in the same order. That's important. And then, make sure your loops are working properly before you move on to part 3. And since I did a demo for you, you know what to expect, how it should be behaving at this point. So, make sure you run the tests and you're passing tests 1 through 10. And then once your TA has, taken a look at this, you can move on to part 3. And that's just the part where you're going to be doing the grading. So they talk a little bit here about, exactly what it is that you need to do for that. This is where they tell you about that 80% or higher for pass fail, the case sensitivity, etc. Using that variable grade that they've provided inside. See, it's right here. Yeah, they've provided this grade for you to store that percentage inside the grade quiz function. So they've given you everything you need to structure this really well. Even if you don't understand all of it yet, as long as you put your stuff in the right place, the program should run beautifully. So at this point, you should be able to not only, take your quiz through the paces and make it, function properly in the console, but also run these tests and see all these beautiful green check marks and pass all 17 tests at this point. If you don't, you can take a look. It'll tell you which test failed, and you can actually come up here and go into this file and find the test and say, okay, what were they looking for? One of the things that trips people up a lot is this one where they make sure that all of the questions that you placed in your array actually have a space at the end of the string. That's important. So there's things like that that you're going to just need to be really specific about. This one right here, I'm going to tell you right now, this one tripped me up because in the table for part 2, let's go back to part 2. You have all these answers here and they have all of them in quotes except for this one. So you might think, oh, that's supposed to be a number, right? They're actually testing for it to be a string. So make sure that when you put these in your array, you put them all in as strings, and then this test will pass just fine. So just things like that. You can actually come in here and say, okay, what were they actually looking for? You can also read the, the comments that it has in the console when the tests fail. It should give you a lot of that information. And you'll get, more comfortable with that as time goes on. But you definitely want to start getting comfortable with it now, because all those things in the console, when you fail a test, the information there is there to help you. Okay, so let's talk about some general things that you can do to avoid some of these common issues that pop up. Just in general, make sure you're reading the instructions thoroughly, because they do give you everything you need, but you might miss it if you're just kind of scanning over it. So take the time to read it through and understand it the first time around, and then you'll be able to, fly a lot faster when you're coding. Make sure you familiarize yourself with that starter code. I just kind of, went over it with you, but you want to dig in and make sure you understand everything yourself. Make frequent git commits. Can't stress this enough. This is a habit that you need to get in as a developer. Get in that habit now. Every time you add some code, you get a little bit of something in there and you get it working properly, even if it's not all of part 1 or all of part 2, go ahead and make a commit and say, okay, this part is working. Just put your little comment in there. And then, make sure you're pushing your code at the end of each part so that your TA can review it, and that it can process through GitHub Actions too. Okay. Use temporary console.log statements to test your values or debug as you go along. You don't have to wait until you have the program written to the point where you're doing the user interaction part just to use the console for your own development purposes. So make sure you're using the console to read out things that'll help you understand what your values are as you're going through it. Do a reality check with node index. Don't forget to run it through its paces and make sure it's working properly. And then, of course, don't forget to run the auto grader. That's going to help you too. The last thing is, clean code. We talk about this sometimes. It's actually really important. And again, as a developer, a good habit to get into now. So clean up your code before you submit it. Any unnecessary comments, code that you decided, oh, I tried this, it didn't work. Go ahead and if it's commented out, just remove it. Any sort of, indenting, line spacing, semicolons, make sure everything's really easy to read and properly, indented, proper syntax, all those things. Okay, part 1, things that trip students up sometimes are the concept of variable scope. So make sure that you understand global versus local scope. Because they've declared all the variables for you, you should be in pretty good shape as long as you're using them as intended. Also remember that input.question returns a value that must be stored. A lot of students forget that. They go and they ask the question prints out, and when you test it, you can respond to it, but then that value goes nowhere if you don't actually store it with your code. Okay, part 2, make sure you have mastered this concept of iterating through arrays with loops and using I as an index in your loop. You need to understand that very, very, very well to make this work, to be able to ask all the questions, gather those answers, to go through and grade them and keep track of how many they got right. You're going to need to really be, have this fundamental down. So, don't gloss over that or you'll get really frustrated really fast. Part 3, just make sure that answer comparison is case insensitive, and then also use that screenshot in the book to remind yourself of how that output is supposed to be formatted. Okay, some last reminders. Make sure you share your code only with your TAs. This is part of the academic integrity policy at LaunchCode, that you do not share your graded assignment code with your classmates or get any sort of outside help from your friend or your family member who's a developer. You need to show LaunchCode that you are capable of figuring this out on your own. It's very, very important. So just make sure that you're working with your TAs only on this. If you get stuck, the first thing you should do is try to figure it out yourself. So debugging something yourself, you learn a lot, even if it's, oh, I made this mistake, or I just discovered 5 new ways not to do this. You learn. It's important. Make sure you recheck the instructions to see if you missed something. Go back and reference the chapters in the book. Reference your lecture slides from your instructor. Whatever you need to do to get examples of the concepts and make sure you understand them the way you need to. If you get to the point where you're banging your head against the wall, walk away for a little bit, okay? And then come back and try again. Sometimes clearing your head is all you need. You just need to have a fresh set of eyes. Make sure you attend office hours with your instructional assistants if you need one-on-one help, if you still can't figure it out on your own. After a point, if you're just banging your head against the wall and you need help, that's what they're there for. So stay in regular communication with your instructional assistants. They're there to support you. Absolutely, 100%. This is the strength of LaunchCode's program, and really why we have so many students succeed is because we have a strong support system in place. So if you just kind of go, silent, complete radio silence, they're going to be concerned about you. You need to be just communicating and letting them know, here's what I'm working on, or here's where I'm stuck. And they want you to succeed. They want you to get to the finish line on this, especially this first assignment, because this is a drop deadline. So this assignment has to be complete and graded by your final deadline in order to stay enrolled in this course. We have learned at LaunchCode that students are more likely to succeed if they can show us at the very, very beginning that they can keep up and master these concepts and do the work, because it is a tough course. So if you can do this, if you can get through this and get this in and then keep up that same level of hard work and attention and perseverance, you can get all the way to the end of the course and graduate. So make sure you are putting the time in on this as much as you can. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is the resources that I have available personally, because when I was a TA a few years ago, I created all of these practice resources for my students. So I have a whole bunch of topical practice that are relevant for this assignment, anything from like variables and getting user input to conditionals, strings, arrays, method chaining, all of these things, template literals. So if you'd like some extra practice, just some quick little fun exercises, you can find those at my website here. I can actually open this up. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, so if you come here, you can see I've got, 80 something resources here, I think. You can filter by topic and find the topic you're looking for. And, like if I want conditionals, I can go and find these. If I, want maybe strings and arrays, I could come and find all the ones related to strings and arrays. I also have, oops, wrong way. There we go. I also have these two graded assignment prep exercises. One's called My Favorite Things, the other is called Haunted House. And really, they're just about problem solving and practicing putting all of these different concepts together, because that's what a graded assignment does. It takes things, from multiple chapters and has you just throw it all together and use it all at once to create a fully functioning program. And so these particular ones, if you come back over here, you can also filter on this topic as well. Just look for graded assignment number 1, candidate testing, and it brings both of these up. These have tutorials, because I actually did live tutorials with my students at the time. So there's videos on YouTube for these. I have those for some of my topical tutorials as well, but not all of them. I have a limited amount of time to work on this stuff these days, and I would like to update all of these and get them on GitHub instead of on Replit. But you can get a free account on Replit to go in and fork these and do these for yourself and code along. And a lot of students have really, really depended on things like this to get them across the finish line, because it helps connect a lot of the dots for them that is in the places that are the most relevant for these graded assignments. So there you go. I hope that all of these things have been helpful for you, and I wish you the best of luck on your assignment.